he talks about how he was over, I don't know how many Satanist, call them churches. He was like the bishop.
You gotta be kidding me.
What was in her heart? You don't know what sin she'd committed. You don't know how much unbelief was there. You don't know whether she hated her husband.
I don't think so.
Why would anybody spend so much time ranting and raving about something that they don't believe in?
Really?
Welcome to Skeptic's Brew Pub with Brother Brewer. And welcome tonight to a special edition of Skeptic's Brew Pub. I'm your host, Brother Brewer, and just for Zach tonight, I'm going to let you know that tonight in the pub I am drinking it's a Red Tail Ale, and my guest tonight has decided that he's going to teetotal tonight, and that is Dr. Doug Krueger. He's a professor of philosophy, a debater, author, co-founder of Fayetteville Freethinkers, and he joins us here to talk about counter-apologetics, which... if you could go ahead, welcome aboard, Doc, and tell us exactly what is apologetics and counter-apologetics.
Well, thank you for having me here on the show. I'm very pleased to be here, and I have been engaging in discussions about religion for a good portion of my adult life, and with apologists and engaging in some sense, counter-apologetics. Apologetics is the field of study in religion in which one defends the faith, basically. Apologetics refers basically to defense, and where you're defending your position. And in its most common uses with regard to religion, it refers to people defending the Christian faith or defending some sort of religious view. So counter-apologetics, I suppose, would be the discussion of and critique of apologetics or the religious view in general. So I'm a counter-apologist in that sense. Also, many people have accused me of being very much engaged in the full-throated, very spirited attack upon religious views. But I do want to make clear that it's not an attack on religious people. I just have a problem with the underlying assumptions and the veracity, that is, whether or not it's true, the religious claims.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's something that a lot of, especially when you start to get into true believers, and for those that may not understand the word, what we're talking about when we talk about theists, those are simply people with a God belief, and it could be a Christian, a Muslim, Wiccan. It doesn't really matter what religious belief it is, but someone who is a theist just believes that there is some kind of a God out there.
Right.
And I think it's important that when you're talking with them, constantly make sure that you reiterate to them that you're not attacking them. You're attacking possibly the belief that they have that may not necessarily, not just not be rational, but also may not be healthy. Because I know that there's a lot of beliefs out there that aren't healthy.
Well, that's a good point. And in fact, as now the president of the Fayetteville Freethinkers, and I have been involved in the group since its very inception. As you mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders, along with my good friend, Mr. Darrell Henschel. We have seen a number of people come to our group who have said that they were traumatized when they were children by some religious beliefs, that they have been attacked for their free thought beliefs as adults, sometimes in the workplace, sometimes at home, and so forth. Now, this is not to say that everyone who has religious belief is traumatized, but there are some people who find that when they start to question some of these beliefs, that they all of a sudden lose friends, they lose family members, they're ostracized, and so forth. So there's some things about the religious life that I think we can discuss as very unhealthy, and we can discuss as being very detrimental. And this doesn't mean that we have to be hostile in any kind of overt sense. It's simply that we're critiquing and we're pointing out flaws.
So you said you've been doing this as far as the arguments I'm just going to just call it arguments against some of the theistic beliefs for most of your adult life. So, have you always been an atheist, or is it? How did it come about?
Well, actually, I started out. I grew up in a somewhat religious household. When I was about 9 years old, my mother, who had been divorced, remarried, and she married a minister. And we grew up in a very religious household, but it was not a fundamentalist household, but nevertheless it was quite religious. And I was very happy doing that. I was very happy being a Christian, and so much so that when I was about 21 or 22, I started teaching Sunday school at my local church, and I very much enjoyed that. What brought me to having no belief in God anymore is that once I started going to college, okay, here's the sort of caveat or warning to some of the listeners, I took philosophy classes, and I started questioning things and questioning assumptions and questioning all kinds of statements and inferences made by religious people. And I started asking for evidence, and the more I asked for it, the less I found. And eventually I was driven simply by the weight of the evidence to believing that, okay, if there is a God, then he's not involved in the universe. So for a while I was a deist. Mm-hmm. But then shortly thereafter I became an atheist, because I thought, as a deist, I thought to myself, well, why am I harboring this belief about a being existing if that being isn't going to do anything? What good does this belief do me? And I don't have any more evidence for a deistic God than I do a theistic one. So I abandoned that belief and became an atheist.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like that's kind of how a lot of people go. It's that it just kind of wanes a little bit, and then eventually you get to that point where, like with my own deconversion, it was like I came to the point where it's either God exists, but he's so far removed that it doesn't matter, or he doesn't exist at all. And in either case, there's really no point to it. And so which one is the most likely?
Well, I'm reminded of a study that I saw in Time magazine a number of years ago. Maybe it's been 20 years ago. But it asked people who believe in God to put themselves in several categories. I think they gave them 4 categories of a very active God, a somewhat active God involving in personal human affairs, basically a deistic God that doesn't really get involved, but is there for inspiration and so forth, and then but will judge you at the end of time, and then one that never gets involved, will not judge you, just absolutely has nothing to do with human beings. And of the last 2 categories, the ones where God doesn't get involved in daily human affairs, doesn't respond to prayer and so forth, that was 40% of believers in the United States. I was completely shocked by this. I had no idea there were so many de facto deists in the country. Deists, those who believe that, yeah, there's a God, but he doesn't get involved.
Mm-hmm. And to me it seems like that would be, it's kind of like if he doesn't get involved, then what's the point?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
I know you said that you've been debating for most of your adult life, or you've at least been involved in engaging that. What drove you to start doing that?
Well, that's a very interesting story. What happened was I was when I started graduate school here at the University of Arkansas, and that's where I got my PhD in philosophy. I was in an office with a very hardline fundamentalist Baptist minister who was also in the PhD program, a very nice fellow by the name of Steve Cowan. And he wanted to show a film of an atheist and a Christian debating. This was a film of William Lane Craig as the Christian and Frank Zindler as the atheist. He wanted to show that film and then have a panel there to answer questions. And he would serve as the person answering questions about Christianity, and he wanted an atheist to be the other person on the panel. Well, I agreed to do that, but then he watched the film and he didn't like it. He didn't like the format. He didn't like the way it went. So he said, you know what, Doug, instead of showing a film, why don't you and I just debate? And I said, well, that sounds good to me. Let's do it. So we debated. We had our debate in Giffords Auditorium there in the campus of the University of Arkansas. That holds, I think, a little less than 300 people or something. And we totally, 100% packed that place full. We had to turn away as many people as we admitted into the auditorium. That's how many people there were. Wow. And in addition to that, there were people in the stairwells holding the doors open, on the stairs listening with their ears pressed against the walls in some cases and so forth. There was a great need among the people to see what happens at such a debate. People wanted to see the different sides of this argument, and we were debating whether God exists. And there was the people were very, very nice at this debate. We were all very civil, and I decided there, you know what, I need to do more of this. And now I've done over a dozen debates all across the country and on the radio, and it's been very rewarding. I think sometimes churches will sponsor these kinds of events. Sometimes skeptics groups will sponsor these kinds of events. And then sometimes it'll just be some event held by a campus group. So I've been to campuses of different colleges and universities around the country. And by the way, if any of your listeners know of someone who would like to engage in debate with an atheist, I'm up for it. Let me tell you, I would love to do another debate. They're lots of fun, and people I think enjoy them.
They look like it, and the debates that I've watched have all been really, well, for the most part, have been really interesting. There have been a couple that were painful. I think anything with Sept is going to be pretty painful for people to try to watch on both sides of the fence, because he's not.
Oh, I'm unfamiliar with this fellow.
If you get a chance on YouTube, there's a debate that he debated Matt Dillahunty. It was a few years ago. He's a very big presuppositionalist, and it was.
Oh, I debated a presuppositionalist in Sandy Cove, Maryland, some years ago.
Well, Sept was just painful to watch. I mean, it was everything that he said. You wanted to throw your shoe at the TV or something while you're watching it. It was just. Some of his arguments were just so bad. I mean, it was not a good.
You know, presuppositionalists, I was just mentioning them in class today. We started our section in my Introduction to Philosophy course regarding evidence for and against God's existence. And I mentioned that there are some theologians, some schools of thought in theology that are against providing proofs of God's existence, and the presuppositionalists are in that camp. Mm-hmm. They think that not only is it impossible to prove that God exists, but it's immoral to try to show that God exists. Huh. And so they have a completely different route to trying to get people to believe that God exists. But one thing they don't do is try to provide evidence through natural theology or through looking at nature or things like that. So when people come up to me and they try to give me arguments for God's existence and so forth, sometimes I do want to caution them, and I say, look, just be aware that even if you believe in God, that doesn't require you to endorse any old argument for God's existence. It's okay to say, you know what, this argument for God's existence doesn't work, because you know what, there's an entire school of theology that says none of them work.
Yeah. That's so tell me also, why do you think the average atheist or skeptic should know some of the basic counter apologetics, some of the counter arguments? I mean, like the average person on the street who maybe has that one person at work that's really hammering them about belief in a certain version of Christianity, or maybe it's a family member. Why do you think it's important to actually maybe engage them, as opposed to going, look, I really don't really want to go there. Can we just talk about something else?
Well, I certainly think that there's room for people to just say, you know what, I don't want to get involved in this kind of discussion. But I think it would be good for atheists who do want to engage in discussion to be familiar with some of the basic arguments for God's existence and the rebuttals to them, because one of the stereotypes about atheists, about non-believers in general, is that they are non-believers because something happened to them. You know, like, sometimes people will say, did you get in an argument with your pastor? Or, something like that. Did somebody say something bad to you or whatever? And I say, well, I no more stop believing in God because somebody said something bad to me than I stopped believing in the tooth fairy because I had a fight with my dentist.
Right.
That's not the story. The